This is Truth Be Told.
That not only are there reptilians here,
new evidence of UFO fleets.
We were close to nuclear war.
To help you transform so that you can live your highest truth.
We're not being told just because we're not ready for it.
Radio stations of frequency, vibrational.
I was a homicide detective with LAPD.
UFOs increase. Visitations. A mother's love. There's nothing like it. But what if a mother turned to a murderer? Today we talk with Sherri Aikenhead about a 12-year-old girl that went missing, Karissa. And the mother, Penny, pleads to the public to help find her child. Well, this plead turned to an arrest. Today we're going to go through the journey of the national bestseller, Mommy Don't, and talk about what led to the murder of Karissa. I'm Tony Sweet with Truth Be Told. Please welcome to the Truth Be Told studios for the first time, best-selling author, Sherri Aikenhead.
Hey, Tony. Thanks for having me.
Well, thank you for being here. I'm so excited to have you here. You know, I hate to even say excited, but I'm excited because of people like me and you that we really get wrapped up in true crime of why people do what they do, especially when you hear about a mother murdering a daughter. So, first of all, I'd like to welcome you to the show and tell people, please get the book, the best-selling book, Mommy Don't, From Mother to Murderer. The true story of Penny and Karissa is, how do you pronounce that last name?
Boudreau.
Boudreau. So, well, let's start at the beginning how did you fall into the information of wanting to write this book?
Well, Tony, I have 3 sons, and one of them was around Carissa's age. So when, like everyone in Nova Scotia, province I'm from in Eastern Canada, I watched on television the night that Penny went on TV. We'd had a blinding snowstorm. It was horrible weather, freezing temperatures. And when I saw this distraught mother pleading for help to find her 12-year-old daughter, who only had pink Crocs on her feet and a sweat hoodie, my heart broke. I mean, I felt such pity. She asked, she was pleading even with her daughter to come home if she was mad, because they'd had a little argument, like
right.
12-year-olds and mothers do. So for me, my initial attraction was really just as a parent concerned. But then later, I at the time was working as a communications person in the Department of Justice. And when things started to look suspicious, this one really intrigued me and caused me to be very hooked on this story and follow it, both in my job and as a mother.
Well, I find it fascinating to wonder why mothers, because we've heard, mothers doing this before, and it never ceased to amaze me why and what leads up to how a mother could do that. So my mother, she loved, there's 4 of us, and she loved us to, like, no matter what we did, loved us and stood by us and supported us. And it just amazes me to figure out what leads to a mother to do this. So can we start from the beginning of your investigation and writing your book of how this begun? What caused her to become, I hate to say, almost a monster mom?
Well, absolutely. There's definitely people who feel she is a monster. I was in the courtroom with the little community of 8,500 people, small town, seaside community, when she sat in the prisoner's box and shocked everyone by pleading guilty to doing this. And you could barely hear her. The lawyers had read statements of fact about what she was about to confess to, and it was awful. I mean, the judge was so horrified that she said, you can never call yourself a mother again in her sentencing. But my stomach was just knotted up. And, police didn't suspect her. Why would they at the beginning when her daughter was missing? She went on television twice. She said all the right things. And people searched riverbanks. The whole community got involved trying to find this little girl. Helicopters, divers looking under frozen ice, thinking maybe she had fallen in trying to get home. But unfortunately, after almost 2 weeks, a little boy was on the riverbank. His mom had stopped to let him have a pee, the LaHave riverbank, and looked down and saw what appeared to be toes sticking out from underneath the snowbank, and screamed. And once they found Carissa's remains on the side of the LaHave River, Penny and her boyfriend were brought in for questioning. So this is kind of a complicated family. She was going through a divorce, Penny. She had married someone, Carissa's stepfather, for 7 years, but she'd actually been with his brother, who is Carissa's biological dad. So we're talking about, a blended family, some challenges, and police automatically start with family first.
Right.
They never suspected the mother immediately. It's always the boyfriend. Like you said, it's never the mother. I mean, in Canada, this never happens. I know we've heard it, like you say, a few cases over the years. But no, they would not sort of entertain that. And yet, the boyfriend, who had a background of assault charge and, he was unraveling, and Penny was cool as a cucumber, as they say, sitting, being questioned, cooperating along with police. And then people started to get suspicious because she wasn't acting like a normal mom would. Like you say, maybe your mom, my mom, me, we'd be distraught. We'd be crying. We'd be looking all over the town. And, there were missing posters up, but she remained at her home, didn't really go searching for her daughter.
Wow.
And, they started to, they said, we need to take another crack at an interview. And they were under pressure, Penny and her boyfriend, because they were living with Carissa. They'd only been together 4 months in a tiny little apartment with paper-thin walls. And poor Carissa, I mean, she was just a girl trying to make sense of a ever-shifting world at age 12 and 13, and had been living with her dad, but wanted to live with her mom. Girls that age. It just didn't work out. There was a lot of tension. So after they discovered Carissa's remains, the neighbors started noticing, instead of grieving her, there's a lot of noise coming from next door, the apartment, a lot of screaming and fighting, and the boyfriend getting drunk. And at one point, a neighbor hears them say, she did it. She killed her daughter.
Oh, wow. So the neighbors did hear that.
They did. They heard him say something like that, and of course they called police. So it didn't take too long before Sergeant Scott Wiener's hairs went up on his neck, and they said, we need to have another look at this couple.
Was Carissa the only child in the home?
Yeah, she was.
Oh, well,
she was Penny's only daughter, and she was a spunky, sweet little girl. She wanted to be a veterinarian.
Aww.
She volunteered to be a peer mediator. She was very close to her grandmothers, both her fathers, her stepfather, her biological dad. Just a lovely, lovely girl. And yet, the police go over and check her room, and they find these diaries, handwritten diaries by her. And they could sense right away that she was very unhappy because her little handwriting, I hate my life because I don't like living here. Mom's engaged to Vernon, the boyfriend. She was very distraught. So when you put that together with some of the things all the neighbors were calling him with. The police, it wasn't very long. It was actually Valentine's Day when they brought them in, and they thought, we're going to arrest both of them and see if we can kind of squeeze a confession out of. They know more than what they're saying.
Well,
but Tony, that did not work. I mean,
right. Now, how long did they live next to these neighbors? Did they move in? Did she move in with the boyfriend in the 4 months? Oh, okay.
Yes. And they were, they were just like ordinary couple, honestly, working at a grocery store. Mm-hmm. She was a cashier, and by everyone's account that I interviewed, over 25 people in the past few years, researching this book, she was an ordinary mom, but she definitely flirted with men, according to her colleagues who worked with her and her friends. And she met one of the grocery stock boys who worked the night shift. That's Vernon. And she loved him, and she definitely did not want to lose that relationship.
I was going to say, before Vernon, was there any accounts of abuse before?
None.
Because I was wondering, because I know there was up here in California, they had I live in Santa Clarita, and Lancaster, Palmdale was about 45 minutes away, so 30 some miles. And this mother and her boyfriend, I don't know if you've ever heard of it, they tortured her son until he actually died, and they got convicted and sent to prison. But a lot of times the mothers end up falling in love with the boyfriend so much they don't want the daughter or son to interfere with their relationship. And if the boyfriend sometimes doesn't want the child to get the attention or whatever, is that something that happened in this case, where the boyfriend? This
is exactly what happened. You got it. There was no abuse, and I would never suggest that. I've read all the police files. However, the fighting that was going on between Karissa and her mom, like the tension in the home over those 4 months, from November actually to January, Vernon, the boyfriend, said, you guys got to get a counselor. You got to go. He actually said, you got to go have a powwow. Go have a talk. You got to go talk about this.
Right.
You got to work things out. So Penny, when she does confess, she interprets that as an ultimatum, that it's either my daughter or me. Now, she takes her out for a drive on a Sunday afternoon, and says, we'll go work it out. We're going to talk. We're going for a drive to talk. And she takes her, Sunday afternoon here, that day of that snowstorm. And they try to talk in the car, by Penny's account. They start fighting again. But, the sad thing is, it was not an accident in the end, from even her own confession. So
this is premeditated.
She brought twine in her trunk.
Yeah.
And she, I don't know if I'm getting ahead of things here, but to your original question, definitely when police searched the apartment, they found love notes from Penny to Vernon that I got copies of in my research. And it's very clear that she wants to be lifelong partners with Vernon. She'd do anything for Vernon. Don't ever leave me. So what you're describing, yeah, I mean, blinded by the need for this ultimate close relationship, because it hadn't worked with the other two men who were brothers. It hadn't worked out with them. So she was yearning for this. Well,
it sounds like, if you're having an affair with your brother, the brother of your partner, it's kind of brought that on herself. So that's one thing. But how old was Penny when this happened?
33.
So she was young. Not saying that's any reason to do what she did, but 33 is really young age. You're still. Though my mother was 30 when she had me, I was the baby. So she's had 3 kids before me, from 22 to. So, but again, that was. and my parents had, relationship issues, but there was never a point to where my mother or father said, I'm going to get rid of my children to save my marriage. So,
and that's what horrifies people and me. Honestly, like, what mom hasn't been frustrated at times?
Right.
Who hasn't? I mean, I had 3 boys, and I mean, of course, you there are days when you're just like at your wit's end. But to your point, like, what pushes this person right over the edge? I mean, I got some psychological reports, and there was no mentally unfit defense here. She was assessed, and she was a.
Did she try that? Did she try that angle?
She didn't.
Oh, okay.
Her defense lawyer had it done, but when it came back that, depressive state of mind and borderline personality issues, but not strong enough, not unfit. And I think that's what makes it so horrible. And even to her own family, just heartbroken that, I mean, Penny was a nice woman. Even her friends, she said, like, she'd remember what you'd like, bake it for you at Christmas time, great gifts. Wow. So that's what makes it even worse, is that there just was no signs. Right?
And what about her parents? Did they ever speak out about the childhood, or family friends talk about her childhood? Was it abusive? Was it a great family?
Well, good question. Because, you go back, and so did I. So I went way back. I did end up interviewing her stepmother and stepsister, Penny's. And I did learn through my research that when Penny was 11, her own mom committed suicide in Toronto, Canada. And I mean, you got to think that affects a child's ability, she's to have some maternal instincts. I mean, this is something she did tell her counselors later, that that affected her, and she never talked about it her whole life until she went to jail. But again, it was just so cold and calculated that it just caused outrage. And I mean, this story made headlines in the Daily Mail in the UK and all over Canada because it was so senseless. Those other family members we are mentioning, they all would have taken Karissa if it hadn't worked out.
Right.
And to me, that's why I wanted to pay tribute to Karissa, because just so needless. This wasn't an accident. This is something, she is a victim, and her family are still victims for their whole lives, and really shook the whole community. I mean, this story I wrote, the town is as much a character as well, because it had only had one murder in 15 years. So can you imagine, like, you're out there looking for this child, like the guilt and the anguish people felt.
Right,
I was here a few weeks ago doing a book reading, and there's still 15 years later, such anger and felt duped, completely manipulated.
Well, let me ask you this, because like you said, if she was wanting to focus on the relationship, the father, you said, was still alive. Is that right?
Yeah, the father and the stepfather. Yeah.
So let's say that, the father is still alive. You could have approached the father. You could have approached your parents saying, hey, could you take Karissa from me for a while I focus on myself or focus on building a relationship, getting myself together. But yet she chose to murder her to get her out of the picture. So did she say why? Did she feel like that maybe that was going to show her as a failed mother if she gave her away? But I'm like, the biggest fail is killing your daughter. So I don't know how that mindset of giving her away
contradiction. Yeah. She did say that, she later, when we look at her parole report and what she says to the parole board as she tries to get passes here in Canada. In fact, she did say that, she was afraid that Karissa was going to badmouth her, like she was trying to be the perfect mother.
Oh, she didn't.
And she even says to police in her statement that's in the book, the verbatim statement, she says there's not many kids that hate their mother like Karissa hates me. So, it's deep there. One of the saddest things is, and one of the, I think, most interesting things about what I researched and your listeners, is that in Canada, we have a technique called Mr. Vague, Undercover Operation. And honestly, as I mentioned, they brought her in for questioning. They arrest her for 24 hours, her and Vernon. But by then, she clamps up and says nothing. It's a lawyer. So she almost got away with murder. If it were not for, they didn't have an eyewitness. They didn't have, proof that she had done it other than, good gut instincts and police, antenna. But if they hadn't done an undercover operation that lured Penny into this and was her downfall, I don't know. She might have got away with it, I think.
So I remember when I was a kid, my mother and my sister, well, I have two sisters. The one passed away, the one that I'm getting ready to talk about. So when she was a teenager, my mom and her, oh my God, they butted heads. Woo, they butted heads. They even had one time a physical altercation where my sister was like, I'm going out. My mom said, no, you're not. And so she said, I'm leaving. And so my mom grabbed her arm just to stop her. And then my sister tried to hit my mom. Of course, then my mom just knocked the hell out of her. And because she was a MP in the military, my mom was. And she never did it again. But, again, no murder. And also, years later, my mom and her, became close again. So, I think mothers, young mothers, do have to realize it's tough to raise children, and they're going to butt heads with you in that teenage years. I know she was 12, but, I was a teenager, and you're like, I'm grown. Nobody tells me what to do. I know what's best for my life, all these things. But again, no murder. So when she started this drive, can you go through the account of what happened? So she said they got in a fight again in the car ride. What happened from that point until she dropped the body off where it was at?
Yeah, this is what I call the lie. This is the story that was told to the public, but then the police, through her confession, we find out what really happened.
Got a different story.
So they do take the drive. It's, it's a Sunday afternoon. The storm's coming that night. They go along the ocean. They drive actually to a place where there's a little animal hospital in Lunenburg and Nova Scotia. They turn around and come back. And Penny says to Karissa, I better go in the store and get a few grocery items. Do you want to come with me? But at that point, they're barely speaking because it's been so tense.
Right.
And Karissa says, no, I'm not going in. And so Penny goes in and buys 2 items, mango juice and bacon. And she is only in there 5 minutes, and she's coming out of the glass doors, and her car is parked right there, and she sees the car empty. So this is, 2008.
Right.
People not using their cell phones as much back then. She uses the good old payphone and calls Vernon and says, he doesn't answer. He's at home sleeping. She says, it's Penny, and Carissa's not in the car. She's gone. She's disappeared. I'm going to go look for her. She might try to come home. She actually calls twice and leaves that voice message. And then she drives around. Well, in fact, she's driving around, taking Karissa up to a wooded area, kind of a country road. And by then it's started to snow, and the ground is frozen. And, Karissa says to her, I just want to get out. Just let me get out. They're not far from the apartment, less than 2 kilometers. Or, less than a mile away. And her mom says, you want to get out, get out. And as soon as they get out of the car, the mom shoves her down. And I mean, it's hard to even describe,
Right,
but she, the title of the book is Mummy Don't, because Carissa's saying, Mummy, don't. And those are the most vulnerable words a child can say. It shows, I think, how scared she was. And Penny kneels on her, and that's when she uses the twine and strangles her.
Wow.
And then she drives around town to get rid of the evidence. She's driving around, putting stuff in a garbage bin. She doesn't realize one of the pink Crocs has fallen off her daughter when she's putting her in the car, the body in the car, and she drives to a coffee shop and puts the twine in the coffee cup and throws it away. And then she drives down to the La Have riverbank, and she rolls her daughter down, thinking she would go down into the river and out to sea because it connects to the Atlantic Ocean. But she falls and hits a tree. And that's her resting place.
I think this is a picture for people that are watching. I think that's the
that's
location.
it. And that's a memorial. It's 15 years later where you can see her name, Karissa. This is where people go to pray and remember her. How innocent she was, and how awful it was. So that's where she rolled her down the hill. And that little boy found her.
Now, go ahead.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So that's what she was doing. But of course, when she gets home, she goes to Vernon. Have you heard from Karissa? And he hasn't. And he goes, dear, well, where is she? Maybe she's mad. She's gone to her friends. So, Penny does call the police by around 8 o'clock that night, saying my daughter's missing. And she calls a few teachers. Help me, is Karissa there? And so begins the lie that she had fled. And the town doesn't know, was she running away? Did she fall? Did someone kidnap her? Did someone see her walking alongside of the road, some truck? I mean, the missing posters were all over the vehicles. There was an Amber Alert into the States, down into Maine and all over within days. Look out for this little girl. So that's how the story unfolds.
Well, I'm curious because Vernon, so a neighbor heard him yell, she murdered Karissa. So when was the point that Vernon found out? Because now if he knows and it's kind of an accomplice. There we go. I was going to say
accomplice. No, he says I think she did.
Oh, okay.
So he's on the phone to a friend of his crying because he's an alcoholic.
Oh, okay.
And the stress of living in this place. So the police sort of target him, and they said he's our guy. We're going to find out what he knows. To your point, what does he really know? So they target him in an undercover operation, and they send an undercover cop to bump into him and make friends with him and befriend him. And for the next 75 days, they focus on Vernon, just to your point. What do you know? They've got him bugged.
Yeah, I'm sure.
They've gone to court, they were just waiting for him to kind of explain what he meant in that drunken state. They need more of evidence. And he doesn't. So the twist in the story is, after several months, Undercover Steve says they conclude, they've been wiretapping them, sending them to do odd jobs for this fake crime organization that is part of what in Canada is known as the Mr. Sting operation. And Vernon does not, in fact, he's blubbering all the time about how much he misses Karissa, and he's afraid of Penny. I want to keep Penny close because I don't know what she'll do.
Oh, wow.
So, ironically, by the end of the book and the story, you'll see people actually feel sorry for Vernon, because here he is being lured into a undercover operation, and gets this new job and thinks life is going to turn around. And in fact, they're just using him to find out what really happened.
Wow. So, okay, so 75 days. So how long did the investigation go from Vernon to Penny? And then how long did it take for them? And what was that evidence that the boy found the girl, but that doesn't still mean that, the mother murdered her. So what was that point that they're like, okay, she did it?
Yeah. So from February 14th, Valentine's Day, when they bring them in and they try to arrest them, and they got nothing.
Right.
They got nothing. They got to let them go. So within a week of that, in February, they start working on Vern. And I tracked down the undercover agent who did this operation, and he told me some really interesting things. He stayed with Vernon from February till May. And when they conclude that Vernon was not part of it, let's use Vernon to lure Penny into this undercover operation. What they do is, now undercover Steve and Vernon are good pals, and he's paying them like $100 a day to deliver packages and do. He says, we need a woman. So that's in May. It only takes them 4 weeks before she is cracking, and they bring her into the operation. She says she wants to work like Vernon is. They have no idea they're working. These are all police. 40 police RCMP are now part of this big operation, wearing wiretaps, videotaping.
Right.
And the police, this is the key, Tony. The police try to rattle her. So they release a story that DNA has been found. And this just puts her right over the edge.
I'm sure.
Because she's thinking, oh my gosh, they've got some blood, they got something, what? So she tells the undercover woman that she's got legal troubles and she needs to take care of them. And this is where Mr. Big brings its final act here, and how they get her. They say, well, we can get rid of your legal problems. Basically they're pretending they're the mob. You got to tell us what happened, and then we'll get rid of all the evidence.
Wow.
She says, I want all that DNA evidence blown up. This is what she says. It's all taped. Then the final scene of when she confesses, she only confesses because she's showing these undercover operators the mob. She doesn't confess to the public until court that day. She tells the mob exactly what happens. The Mr. Big, he's called the crime ring guy. Mm-hmm. He comes into town. He flies in from Vancouver. And he flies into town, and they're in a hotel, and he says, all right, it's just her and him. And all the guys are in the next room watching, and the women, the undercover agents, and they hear Penny tell this Mr. Big that she's almost bragging that she got rid of her problem, and now she needs to move on with her life and get rid of any evidence. And this RCMP guy that I got to know, he said he threw up in the toilet. He just was horrified when he was watching on the video as she described what I mentioned earlier, that fateful drive. And not only that, she says, I'll agree to show you. So they drive from the hotel, and she takes the Mr. Big to every one of the stops where she put the evidence, where she killed her, where she rolled her down the bank. And meanwhile, they're videotaping the whole confession. It's shocking.
It is. I think as I've gotten older, it shows you how people that you think you know who they are are not. They can be the nicest people. They can be, you know, like you said, oh, my birthday, they used to give me cards and make me birthday cakes and say hi to me every time I was at the grocery store. And then you hear about them being child molesters or, you know, later in life, or, you know, all these hidden secrets of people that you think are good people. And not to say that it's put a pessimist in me, but it's definitely made me look at people differently, because sometimes even their actions are not who they really are. I mean, because sometimes, like you said, they can be the nicest people to your face and throughout your life until that last bit of evidence of like, oh my God, they murdered somebody. I would have never thought that. Totally.
And I mean, I think this is what just perplexes everyone in this case. And
Right.
now as we watch, I mean, I get the transcript of what Penny said to her parole board to try to get out on she's out on church passes this weekend. In fact, she has 4-hour passes to go to church. And she told the parole board that since coming into jail, she's come to terms and learned a lot about how to deal with her problems. And that, you know, she had other options. But, you know, there's many in the community are very divisive about this and whether she can be rehabilitated from whatever it was. Even her own lawyer that day in court, that day I said, I'm going to write a book about this. I left that courtroom. I went back to my job and I looked at my colleague and I said, you know, I got to write a book about this. This girl, she's just not a statistic. Like this is awful. We can't sweep it on, you know, we got to remember this for a long time. So and her own lawyer said God only knows what really went through her mind that day.
Yeah. Yeah. And that says a lot when it's your defense lawyer. So how long did it take with a confession? How long did it take to convict her? Did it go before a trial? But did she plead guilty?
You know what? Everything happened so fast. So if we go back to, it was June 14th when they arrested her. Mm-hmm. After she reenacted this for the videotape, she signed a confession. When the police arrest her at a Costco store. Oh, wow. But it's, you know, she only confesses when she sees that they have the videotape. She was even still in denying. And then they played the tape for her.
And then it was like, I did it.
Yeah, that's the first time they said she put her head down and the gig was up. So that was in June of 2008. So, you know, pretty fast. Like if we went from January 27th to June 14th, when they arrest her. But then the court system took about 6 months. And a lot that was happening during those 6 months. She was in jail awaiting trial. No one knew she was going to plead guilty except for the Crown, who was trying to work on kind of a plea agreement with the defense.
Right.
If she pleads guilty, we will go for life in jail, but second-degree murder, which means you're eligible for parole.
Second-degree murder.
Yeah. So then the day we're there in the court in January, all the media are there from all over. This thing is huge. Mm-hmm. And people think this trial is about to start. This is in January. So it's almost 1 year later from the murder to the day. Just past the anniversary of it. And there's been candle vigils and memorials. And people think she's coming in there to face a trial, and many people wanted to hear a trial and the evidence and hear it all. But the Crown and consulted the family, and they just, they agreed that if they gave her 20 years, that would spare them a trial. So instead, she shocks everyone and pleads guilty. The public, the community, right. And me, no one knew. So when she pleads guilty that day, it's international news. Did it for the boyfriend, you know.
What ended up being the sentence for her? Was it the murder too, or?
Yeah, it's life. So she agreed to serve life in prison, but in
without
Canada,
parole?
Ineligibility for 20 years. However, this is what irritates people now and upsets them, is that if there's something called the faint hope clause, and the judge said if after 15 years you have a good record in jail, you can apply for the faint hope clause to get out sooner.
Which is now 15 years, isn't it?
Right. So that's this month. So now she has 90 days if she wants to apply for that, and so far she hasn't. I've been monitoring through the courts. And as I say, she's out on the church pass this weekend. But that is the next chapter of this story. And if she decides not to, in 3 years, she'll be eligible she can try for day parole. And then at 20, she's out. You know, she'll be out. She'll have privileges earlier than 20, I would suspect, because she has a clean record in jail. She has not been a problem.
So she's possibility could very well be out in 5. So for sure. What do you think? Well, first of all, the church visits, is that, I'm sure, escorted. So why isn't there church? Don't they have church services in prison? So I've never heard of actually privileging of going out of prison to go to church.
Good point, Tony. And you're right. She is escorted. She has been granted these for the past 3 years. It's because she's taken what's called a personal development. Most of her family have cut her off. She has no way. So church, she was quite religious, which, you know, ironic considering the murderous act that she committed.
Right.
But she chose church, and she told the parole board, this is a way for me to develop personally. So when I do get out, that I'm ready to get out. So that was her choice, because you're right, there are church services inside, but she felt like if she could develop a new community, because Bridgewater doesn't want her back.
Well, I was going to say, how does the church itself, which, you know, I guess church should accept people no matter what they do, but I'm curious to see how they are accepting her, and what I'm curious about that conversation of, you know, did they call the church to see if that was okay, or did they just showed up?
Well, here's another controversial issue. There are many with this case. The public cannot know where she is.
Oh,
because
okay.
They would be worried about vigilantism.
Yeah, I would
and
too.
So, privacy. But yes, they did find a church. I tried to find a church. I couldn't. So no one has ever, obviously they're accepting of her because they've never gone to the media with it. Yeah. I guess that is a theme in this book, redemption and forgiveness. But, it's many people split on that. Everyone has their own views on that.
Yeah. When I was a kid, my cousin was murdered by her ex-husband, and and he went to prison for, I think, 25 years. And so I remember when the parole, because when he went into prison, he threatened, the parents, saying, if I ever get out. So I'm surprised he even never got out. I know he ended up passing away. I'm not for sure if it was in prison or out of prison. Okay. So, but I didn't hear anything about her threatening anybody else. But were there like the father or stuff? I mean, was there anybody that threatened, like, if she gets out, I'm going to? I mean, because that's always a possibility, you know. Has there anybody?
No, there hasn't that I'm aware of. The father, he, it's been tough on him and his
I'm
brother.
sure.
You know, they both raised Karissa. I mean, they lost so much. And the father did go on TV when these church passes came out, and he said, if she can look me in the eye and tell me, you know, why, and that she's sorry, then I might understand it, but I can guarantee you she won't. So, you know, I think the community still feels like they want Penny to take responsibility. And I tried to reach Penny for this book. She has never given an interview in 15 years.
Oh,
She's
really?
never spoken to anyone except her parole board. And, so we can only find out what she's thinking and what she's saying by being informed by those here proceedings.
Right. Wow.
But the town of Bridgewater, I was there last weekend. It's just mixed feelings. They felt like, couldn't we have seen something? You know, if people were in the apartment or working with them.
Right.
So there's this guilt still to this day, and as well as just, you know, anger at being duped. Like, they were screaming at her when she was entering the courthouse.
I'm sure, yeah.
Oh, they were lining the streets like, you know, baby killer. Like, it was a tough time for that town, and it still is. And I think that's why I was able to get a lot of people to talk to me and go back, because, I tracked down 3 young girls. I do want to share this,
Yes, please.
They were 12 years old, and they were best friends with Karissa. I went to each different of her different places that she lived, where she was born, where she went to elementary, and then the final school that she was at in Bridgewater. And these girls were so brave. They're young women now, 27. 2 of them are mothers.
Oh, my gosh.
And, the courage they showed talking about having a friend murdered, like in a little small town. And the mom, like, the mom's like your mom, right?
Right, exactly.
So I really respected them for, and I think it was therapeutic for sure for one girl. She said, I was just full of anger and hate for so many years that it was just, she became an addict.
Oh, really? Oh, man.
Yeah. So this stuff really affects, like, it's such a,
affects everyone.
Like you pointed out at the beginning, this is a rare crime. And that's, so it does affect people. Any murder does, of course.
Right.
Empathy for any victims and families. But when it's this close and you're young, I mean, just brutal.
Yeah. Well, unfortunately, time's up, because I don't know you're going on vacay, but I want people to go out and pick up this book, Mommy Don't, from Mother to Murderer. And you can go to Sherri's website. And I hope I said Aikenhead. Is that?
Yeah, SherriAikenhead.com, but
Perfect.
It's on Amazon. It's been 1 week it was in the top there on Amazon. And
wow.
Yeah, and Barnes & Noble has, I think, the audio, but definitely it's for sale. We're in second print. So
Good for you. Congratulations. And, it's a sad occasion, but I think people like you that, put pen to paper and at least bring to light, Karissa will be remembered and not forgotten. So this is, I think, a good occasion to say congratulations on your success with the book, but also to keeping her legacy
her memory
going.
alive.
Alive, yeah. So, but thank you so much, and thank you for being part of Truth Be Told, and we hope to have you back in the future.
Thanks, Tony. Take care.
And if anybody wants to, ask a question to Sherri, please leave a comment in the chat room, and I will get that to Sherri, and maybe later on we'll have her back and we can do a live to answer some of these questions. So I think that would be a great opportunity for Sherri to do that. So, but until next time, I'm Tony Sweet with Truth Be Told. Please support our Truth Be Told family. We have Bonnie Burkhardt, who does her Truth Be Told transformation on Wednesdays at 3. Robert Hensley, a Minuteman Report on Mondays at 3. And then also Truth Be Told Espanol with Metaphor Tuesdays at 3. So we thank you guys for your support and keeping our episodes growing and building. And after 13 years, I appreciate you guys following us. So until next time, I'm Tony Sweet. Have a good one. Bye. This has been another episode of Truth Be Told. Thank you so much for watching. Recorded live at UBN Go Studios in Burbank, California. Join us on social media. Facebook, Truth Be Told Radio. Instagram, Truth Be Told Paranormal. Go to Truth Be Told Worldwide for more information on upcoming shows. This has